Welcome to the Chiefs. With me are the Chief of Newsbag, Vice Valdez, and the Editor-in-Chief of Philippine Star, Ami Pamintuan.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Wala yata si Ed, nauna yata, maaga yata ang weekend ni Ed.
Oo nga, napaaga.
Yeah. Ami, apart from yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon, which is still yung pinag-usapan natin yesterday, and it's still the hot topic, ano ba? What are the other big stories today?
Yung PhilHealth
tatakbo ulit.
No.
Yun na nga. National position lang naman. Baka natin na lang. Baka babalik lang sa Senate.
National Senate or up.
Pero wala pa raw give up. Sabi ng kampo niya, this doesn't mean anything with respect to our ongoing protest against Vice President Leni Robredo.
Oo nga sana mabilisan na yung pag-resolve ng kaso yan, ano? Ang tagal tapos na yung term nila.
Parang nag-stop si Associate Justice Leonen, no? That's what they're saying, no? Ang tagal niyang inupuan yung desisyon. Tapos finally, nung kumilos siya, comment lang ang hiningi niya from COMELEC, right? Ayun. Yes. So,
Then in other news, gaya na sabi mo na, Ami, no? Even the new PhilHealth chief is now speaking out on proposals na i-privatize na lang or i-abolish ang PhilHealth.
Yes. Pero hindi na privatize, no?
Hindi pwede. Saka pinag-resign niya yung mga top officials. Hiningaan niya ng resignation. Well, I guess courtesy resignation for the reorganization, di ba? Yung gusto ni Presidente. So, nakikita siguro natin yun in the coming days.
Okay. But these are, among other things, these are the kinds of things that people are waiting for Congress to, for whatever it's worth, for Congress to give some direction, what's going to happen to PhilHealth, what's going to happen to the budget. And that's our segue to basically the larger things, the larger cloud still hanging over the House of Representatives. The very confusing, but always intriguing. And dahil nakaka-intriga to, we have a very good guest. Magaling sa mga intriga to. We have with us Anakalusugan Representative Mike Defensor. Congressman, welcome to the Chiefs.
Robbie, good evening. Ma'am Ana, Luchi, magandang gabi po sa inyo. Wala si Ed, no? So magandang gabi.
Good evening. Okay. Yes, welcome.
Congressman, we'll let you have a clean slate here in setting the table for us. Ano ba talaga sitwasyon ngayon sa Kongreso? On the one hand, nag-offer mag-resign si Speaker Allan Peter Cayetano, tapos nagbotohan kayo. I mean, we'll get into that vote later because maraming nagtatanong, may mga questions about that vote. But nagbotohan kayo and you said no. Ano ibig sabihin ng pag-reject nyo sa resignation ni Allan Peter Cayetano? Does that supersede and is that now the bottom line? In other words, wala na ba kung ano man ang napag-usapan sa Malacanang the previous night?
Okay, well, first and foremost, yung nangyari kasi dito sa debate nila, yung meeting pala nila, medyo confusing yung mga nakukuha naming signals. And then it was eventually revealed by Speaker Cayetano himself nung siya na yung nagsalita. And sabi nga niya, ayoko nang hintayin yung 14, ikaw na to. Kunin mo na yung buong budget, you take care of it, take care of the approval, you take care of the Senate and the BICAM, which will end probably sometime December if we want to have a full implementing budget by next year. So nangyari was, nagkaroon sila ng ganong usapan, so si Speaker nagsalita and then he offered a resignation. And then from there, I stood up, in fact I was the one who made a motion to reject the offer of the Speaker to resign as Speaker of the House. So on the basis of that, nagkaroon ng botohan. In fact, I even mentioned before the voting that they should object already. Those who would want a change in leadership should already stand up. Kung ayun na sila, kung mag-object na sila, magkabilangan na habang maaga. Turns out we have 184 votes and it's still adding up. Kanina may mga tumawag sa akin, may mga tumawag sa ilang mga kasama to include their votes kasi syempre malalayo yung mga tao, iba-iba yung mga pinuntahan. I guess some of them baka may mga umiwas din, I'm not sure. Pero basically what happened was we have 184 votes and then 1 against and 9 abstentions. So actually ako talaga itong gentleman's agreement na sinasabi na may pagkakaisa, medyo I don't want to speak against it, but parang the country should not be subjected to that. Congress should not be subjected to that given the situation that we are in right now. Kung normal to na last year, wala namang problema, we go through the budgets, ayusin namin. Pero ito talaga even the budget deliberations, yung Department of Health, sinuspend namin. Kasi yung Health Facilities Enhancement Program nila, parang magbibigay sila 100,000 per barangay, so on and so forth. So, we agreed, we sat down with the Department of Health, Speaker Allan Cayetano was there, he joined us. Sabi, hindi, we will add on to your budget, pero ayusin nyo. Hindi pwedeng ganito. Dapat nakita na natin yung naging problems sa COVID and yung requirements na kailangan gawin. And so, ganun yung naging trend doon sa House, no, nung magkaroon ng debate. And siguro, kung minsan sinasabi nila, bakit ganun, Mike? Anong nangyari? Ako, siguro dapat tanungin yung mga supporters and leaders ni Congressman Allan Lord Velasco. For example, Deputy Speaker Don Gonzales, Deputy Speaker Johnny Pimentel. These were the two stalwarts leading the campaign during his speakership fight. Sila din yung nag-organize after that para dun sa mga miyembro ng PDP. And yet, the two of them were in the camp of Speaker Allan Cayetano. Majority Floor Leader Martin Romualdez fought against Allan Cayetano during that fight. And at the time, si Martin had the numbers and I think both camps would agree to that. Pero nitong nagkabutuhan na naman, and in fact, nag-usap kami before that, kami nila Martin are in the same camp, that we will continue to support Speaker Allan Cayetano given the situation we are in right now.
Okay, Congressman, we will hihimayin natin lahat yan. We will get into all the different aspects that you mentioned. But right now, nandun pa rin tayo sa bottom line. As you said, you actually wanted to treat the vote yesterday as, ito na, magkabilangan na tayo. Labasan na tayo ng mga suporte. Tingnan natin kung sinong may numbers, no? But at the same time, we understand what you're saying, that these are extraordinary times, di ba? What happened nearly 1.5 years ago, we did not see COVID coming and this crisis that we're in. So understood. So what people are trying to understand now is, what about the compromise? And specifically, there are 2 dates being bandied about. One is October 14. So yung boto, in other words, when you rejected the resignation of Speaker Cayetano, were you essentially just saying, teka muna, we're just holding on to you until October 14 kasi yan ang nabalitaan namin na gusto ng presidente at binasbasa ng presidente. The other date was December. Why not then a compromise, get us past the budget deliberations, and then by December, pagka medyo stable na, keep to the gentleman's agreement?
Well, number one, I'm not privy to what they agreed upon before, what they agreed recently last week. Hindi ako kasama dun sa pag-uusap nila. And it was only during the speech, no? I swear, first time I heard what really happened, what transpired, and ano yung exchanges nila with the president. Ako, tama ka din, Robbie, no? They could have easily agreed to that. But, may isang question kasi ako that, it's not just a question of the agreement. Para bang, okay, 1 year, 5 months, nandyan kami. 15 months, nandyan kami. Nagka-COVID. Kami pumapasok, nakikita nyo naman kami. Nandun kami sa plenaryo at the height of COVID. PhilHealth, we were hearing that. ABS-CBN, it was there during the debate. Yung Bayanihan Act, which we had approved, the New Normal Act, and about 4 or 5 laws, which we debated on, which we studied at that time. Parang hindi naman namin, si Congressman Lord, kaibigan ko siya. Hindi kami close. Pero sa Kongreso, one time kami nagkausap eh. One time kami nagkasama. So again, parang, it's just not a simple thing na para bang, parati ko sinasabi, ano ba ito, kaharian? Na may hari, namatay na, yung prinsipe papalit. Diba, you should earn the trust of the members of Congress. You should earn the trust of the leadership of Congress. Ang dami namin ginagawa. Siguro yung niline up na SONA ni Presidente, 30 legislation that we have to approve. And there should be a balancing act on that. For example, telcos. Hindi naman pwede yun na isasara mo yung mga telcos, di ba? You have to make sure that the telcos are doing what they're supposed to do, that NTC is doing their job, ayusin natin yung signal, ayusin natin lahat. I mean, there's a lot of gravitas in leadership, breadth of leadership that we need to guide us. Isa lang yun, ako sa health. Ang dami kong gustong pasukin, ang dami kong gustong tingnan. And my other colleagues are looking to different things. So, kailangan makita namin na nagtatrabaho, hindi naman kailangan brilliant o magaling na magaling eh. Yung nakita mo lang na masipag nagtatrabaho is enough to inspire you to work and to inspire you to do things together as Congress. For the longest time, ang taas ng ratings ng Congress, I think it's also because a lot of us are seen working, a lot of us are doing hindi naman perfect. Marami din kami batikos, but we're doing our jobs. We're doing our best to serve our country and to provide the legislation required by the country now, especially during COVID.
Congressman, we talked to last night with El Rey Villafuerte, and he said something similar. And we also talked to a supporter of Congressman Velasco, si Buhay Party List Lito Atienza, and he was explaining na kaya daw ganon, ang agreement daw nila Lord Velasco at saka ni Alan Peter, maglelaylo muna si Velasco during the 15 months, and he will allow Alan Peter to shine. He will be given full reign. Kaya nga daw hindi muna siya nagpa-participate. What do you think of that?
Alam mo, Ma'am Ami, tatanggapin ko lang in normal times. Okay lang yan. Ayaw nyo muna gusto nyo mag-distance from each other so as not to offend each other, when you conduct ourselves. Pero yun lang presence mismo. Sa Congress is very important. Makita ka lang namin, batihan ka namin, kamustahan. There was a time we had a hearing on power. I was hearing Pisalm, and he was also, I think, hearing the same concern. Not a phone call. Ano bang nangyari, Mike? Bakit tayo nagka-ibatang hearing tayo? Pareho tayo ng ginagawa. Pwede ba tayo mag-join? Some of his supporters even attended my committee hearing. And I said, I welcome it. Kung si Congressman Lord Velasco will be heading the joint committee hearing, I would welcome that. But more importantly, Ma'am Ami, napag-gera tayo eh. Diba? Umabot tayo dito sa COVID, may gera yung bansa. Hindi lang yung Kongreso, buong bansa. So, syempre, ang kailangan mo, isang general, sige, hindi ka muna general. Colonel ka na muna, pero nandiyan ka. Sabay-sabay natin gawin itong problema, tasin natin itong mga problema, pagdebatehan natin. Because this is the time when leadership is required. There are so many concerns during the time of COVID. I think we formed about 4 committees or 5 committees. Peace and Order, Health, the Social Amelioration Program, and if I'm not mistaken, yung OFWs, we were all doing that. Kami, siguro 2 hearings ko on the SAP, and I was also doing the OFWs. Diba? Kailangan mo naman meron kang konting presence. Si Martin Romualdez, you don't see him on the floor. Hindi niyo yan nakikita pagka nandiyan kami sa Congress, but every day he is there. He is the last one to leave Congress. He makes sure that we're there and we're conducting everything. Pag nagka-problema, lumalabas yan. And you can ask the congressman.
Congressman, ang priority ngayon yung budget eh. Sinabi kanina ni Lord Velasco na ginagawa niya daw, you're using the budget to hold the nation hostage, to hold Malacanang, the whole nation hostage. Ginagamit niya daw kasi na-delay na nga daw dahil pina-delay. Well, specifically, you were mentioned. Na-delay na nga daw yung deliberation ngayon. What can you say about that?
Okay. I am guilty of suspending that budget 2 times. One is in the committee hearing of the Department of Health at yung pong kahapon. Doon po sa Department of Health, binigay ko sa amin last year, in-approve yung budget sa HPEP. Yung HPEP po is the Health Facilities Enhancement Program. In the Universal Healthcare Law, para palakasin yung sektor ng kalusugan, naglalagay ng budget sa PhilHealth at naglalagay po ng mga budget sa ospital. Or at least, sa mga public centers, maybe barangay health center, regional health units. Last year, hindi ako kumibo, pinabayaan ko. Alam niyo ho, nakalagay sa budget, 100,000 barangay ganito, 200,000 barangay ganyan, 300,000 gano'n. Anyway, during that period after the budget, I went into my oversight function. Sabi ko, ano po mangyayari dito sa mga 100, 200,000? Alam niyo, sagot nila sa akin, stethoscope at pagtimbang. Yung weighing scale. So sabi ko, next budget hearing, I saw it again. And I brought the entire budget. Ito ho ang HPEP ninyo. And every year, it's going down. because they're not utilizing it correctly. Almost 100 billion na po yan. Pero may nakita ba tayong na-develop na ospital? May nakita ba tayong pinakalakas na medical center? In this budget, they had 4.6 billion. Sabi ko sa kanila, ma'am, hindi na ako papayag dito. Hindi na ho pwede na business as usual. Ang sinasabi ko namin sa inyo, palakasin muna natin yung level 1 hospitals at palakasin natin yung mga district hospitals. And ang point ko sa DOH, and I'll say it again, this budget is helping the private hospitals. Bakit? Dito sa lugar namin sa Quezon City, pagka ho nagkasakit kami, well, ako medyo swerte ho dahil nandiyan ang Quirino Medical Center. But the others, let's say in the poor area of Payatas, puro private hospitals po yung nandun. Wala man silang isang center for that. So I said, I will suspend the budget. In Boracay, nakatabi ko si Ted Haresco, ni walang level 1 hospital po doon pag kami nagkasakit. Number 1 tourism area mo. And yet, pag kami na-aksidente, kailangan ng surgery, there's no level 1 hospital. Ibabangka ka, i-helicopter ka, di bring it to Manila or elsewhere. So yun po yung point ko. Pagdating ko ngayon sa mga budget deliberations, ang dami namin problema. Farm to market roads, nakakadebate. Alam niyo po ba yung sa Department of Education, ang nakaprogram sa kanila 40,000 school buildings. Last year ang nagawa, 11 school buildings out of 40,000. So what I'm saying, Ma'am Ami, yung one thing na gawin namin will not affect our submission of the budget, but we have to correct the budget. Di ba trabaho naman namin yun as congressmen? Kung ano yung nakikita namin dapat namin ayusin, gawin na ho namin. And in my particular case, in the health sector, yun po yung advocacy ko. And the one day, I assure you, will not in any way affect or delay it. Kasi ho, ang importante sa amin, by October 17, before we have a recess, the budget is already submitted. Ngayon,
Congressman,
yun naman pala, no? Matatapos nyo naman pala by October 14 or 17, no? Hindi ba kung tutuusin, yung budget naman ang pinakamahalaga at sabihin na natin, pinaka-critical na bump, kumbaga, na objective ninyo na dapat nyong magawa this year, no, going into 2021 and then election year. So, ang tanong nga is precisely kung tapos na yon, hindi ba posible nga na magkaroon na ng change of leadership according to the gentleman's agreement, which according to Congressman Atienza, all of you signed off on last year in June. Why not?
First, I would like to correct the notion that we all signed off. We did not. Ang nag-usap dito, 3 tao. And pangapat si Presidente. Martin Romualdez, Lord Velasco, and Allan Cayetano. Sila po yung nag-usap dyan.
Congress was not in on it.
No, never.
So you're not duty bound to follow it. Parang ganon. It's just on them. Sila.
Technically naman po talaga, dapat naman hindi kami talaga maging duty bound. Nagkataon lang may kampo. Like Martin Romualdez, I was helping him. So sinabi niya, okay, tama na, we will not campaign, majority floor leader ako, let's work with the majority. Pero technically, you know, even si Presidente naman si Presidente nga, mga boto niyan nung panahon namin Joker Arroyo, ang gusto ng Malacanang noon, Manny Villar. Nung tinatanggal na si Manny Villar after the impeachment, Fuentebella, bumoto naman Malacanang Fuentebella, ang Presidente, then Congressman Rudy Duterte, ang boto niya naman is to retain Manny Villar. Now, going back to the budget, ang budget process will end not October 14. We will have to submit it to the Senate. After we submit it to the Senate, we go to a BICAM. Kaya nga sinasabi ni Speaker Allan, ngayon pa lang na ina-approve namin in plenary ang bawat budget ng bawat departamento, ikaw na. Kasi kung ano yung sinubmit, sabi niya kasi daw, the National Expenditure Program, i-approve na as is where is. Sabi niya, Allan, I don't want to be responsible. Ikaw na lang yan ngayon pa lang. Ngayon, kung ito naman ay October 14, tapos babaguhin mo yung budget, pagdating doon, hindi mo paglalabanan o hindi mo ipaglalaban yung policy directive ng Kongreso, magkakaproblema rin. Dahil in the Senate, there's a lot of debate. Hindi naman nung nagkakasundo kagad sa budget deliberation on the points and amendments that we want to raise.
Okay. I mean, Congressman Defensor, I want to bring it a bit to a discussion about politics as well. Nabanggit na lang niya si President Duterte. And people are following this story all the way to Malacanang, all the way to the elections in 2022. Anong ibig sabihin ng lahat na to? for President Duterte and his coalition at the House of Representatives. It was very clear. I think everybody acknowledged it, even Congressman Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, that yes, the president said he would prefer follow the agreement. And basically, this has been disregarded. We're asking you also as a politician, what does this mean for President Duterte? Have you essentially disregarded what he called for?
Well, una sa lahat, nung nagka-campaign dyan, kung ako lang talaga nasunod kay Martin Romualdez, I will not submit myself to Malacanang. I will call for a vote. Because at that time, siya talaga yung may numbers. But Martin Romualdez agreed to it, they sat down, and they all agreed to it. Ngayon, bumalik na naman sila. And they're saying, oh sige, kailan ng palitan, kailan ganito. But technically, ang sinasabi ko nga, di ba, kay Speaker, o kahit sino man, kundi si Alan, ang responsibility mo una siyempre sa bayan as a Speaker of the House, sa institusyon, Congress. Pangatlo, sa amin, sa bawat miyembro ng Kongreso. Ngayon, pagdating naman kay Presidente, I do not see any conflict with that because as far as I'm concerned, if I have a Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, what's important for me is I achieve my legislative agenda. Kung ano yung kailangan na sinabi kong kailangan kong magawa sa pagtatapos ng aking termino bilang Presidente, yun ang kailangan gawin. Kung ang hirap naman nata nung parang lahat, oo, and yet they're not able to deliver the legislation that is required by these economic managers, those who are in charge of the health sector, which are very critical and very important now that we have COVID.
Okay, sabi ni Congressman Atienza, ganyan rin naman daw ang Kongreso noong unang inappoint ni Pangulong Duterte si Cayetano as Speaker. Ayaw niyo rin naman sa kanya. Wala raw siya masyadong support noon. Very, very little. And yet now he has the super majority as it's even called. So ang sinasabi niya, even if you don't like Velasco now as Speaker, who's to say that he's also going to do a good job, maybe even a better job than Speaker Cayetano now as Speaker if he takes over?
Maaari naman. And hindi ko naman tinatawanan yung galing ni Congressman Lord Velasco. Ang akin lang kasi, may pinagdaanan, di ba parang ano yan may pinagdaanan kayong gera. Nakita mo yung leadership nitong taong to. In fact, I'll be frank, maraming mga personalities in the opposition, you will be surprised supporting Allan Cayetano. Kasi kahit na medyo magkaiba ng politika, magkaiba ng pananaw, iba siguro gusto ng presidente, pero sa House, nakikita nila yung trabaho ng tao Nakikita nila yung galing, nakikita nila yung sipag. And so, we just, maybe if I'm in the opposition, I almost joined the minority at that time with the other members such as sila Kit Belmonte, Stella Kimbo, and yet you have these people now supporting the leadership of Allan Cayetano. So, I don't want to be unfair to Lord, pero ang point ko lang naman, hindi to ngayon lang tinanong sa akin sa television. It was in fact sometime, November I think or October last year. Sinasabi ko na, sabihan nyo naman, magpakita, makipagkwentuhan, show a little of the leadership here in the House. Lalo na nung COVID. Siyempre, yun ang kailangan ko na makita Sino ba dito? And I can tell you now, I can name 10, 20 people who can probably lead the House because I've seen them and I know how they work. I do not know yung gravitas or ano yung level ng leadership nila, but I can tell you sa sipag, nandun at nagtatrabaho.
Right.
Okay. Anakalusugan Representative Michael Defensor, maraming salamat po for joining us.
Robby, thank you. Ruchi, Ami, thank you po.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have to go for a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. And now joining us is retired Senior Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Good evening, Justice.
Good evening, Ami.
Welcome
Good evening
again
to our
to the Chiefs.
viewers.
Evening Justice.
Justice,
Good
of
evening,
course,
Richie. Good evening, Robbie.
yes, there was a significant development on your advocacy, of course, on the South China Sea. I'm sure you listened to the president's speech. How did you find it? And what do you think? Were you surprised? And what do you think is a good follow through?
Well, we were pleasantly surprised with the speech of the president because he was very firm in asserting our arbitral ruling. It was a pleasant surprise. But of course, he has to walk the talk. And as I said, that's the national policy that he enunciated at the UN General Assembly, and that must be applied across the board in our negotiations for the Code of Conduct, in the enforcement of our sovereign rights in the EEZ, in the West Philippine Sea, and in gathering support from other countries for the arbitral ruling. It has to be consistent, and we must walk the talk.
Did you
Justice
consider
Carpio.
consider this a drastic turnaround?
Again, please.
Did you consider this a drastic turnaround for the president?
Well, the president has said from the start that he was setting aside or putting aside the ruling, but he intends to bring it up at some future time. And the presidential assistant for foreign affairs said this was the time that he brought it up. But I did not expect him to come out that strongly the UN General Assembly. But we welcome that very much because we've been waiting for that. So the question really is, what does that mean
Yes.
in terms of action on the ground, in terms of our approaches in the Code of Conduct negotiation, in whether we will be sending patrols now in the EEZ, in the West Philippine Sea, or we will, as you know, the Chinese survey ships were there at Reed Bank a few weeks ago. They were also in the northern Luzon, and we did not send any patrol ship to tell them that they could not do those things. We did not even send a patrol aircraft. So what is the meaning of this new policy? Will we be sending our Navy ships, Coast Guard vessels to Reed Bank, where if the Chinese conduct a survey again on Reed Bank, because they cannot do that. They are not supposed to conduct a survey on Reed Bank because only the Philippines can do that.
Yeah, Justice Carpio, you're very clear. You said next step, he has to walk the talk. He has to be consistent as well. On the consistency, people are already thinking, well, good luck with that. We know the president. We don't know what he might say tomorrow. We don't know what he might say. He might wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We don't know what he will utter in the province, in front of the military, in front of whichever audience. But on the other hand, this was spoken at the United Nations General Assembly. This was spoken with China in attendance. Just talk a bit about international law and what that means, being in that formal setting. What does that change in the character of what the president said, in the position of the country, relative to what other informal utterances the president might say from here on?
Well, the arbitral decision is final. If you bring up the arbitral decision in the General Assembly, it's basically to gather world opinion, to get the support of world opinion. It does not add to the legality. What you're doing is actually trying to enforce it because China refuses to respect the arbitral ruling. You go to the UN General Assembly to ask for the support of the other states to convince China to comply with the ruling. That is the purpose of bringing it up to the UN General Assembly. It's not to add to the legal strength because it's there already. It's to seek the support of other countries to convince China to respect and enforce the arbitral ruling.
Do you think that you have actually gained support with that speech? And do you think that we would have gained more support internationally if the president had done that earlier in the
Yes,
term?
because the other countries, for example, France, Germany, and United Kingdom, on their own, without our prodding, without our asking them, almost a month ago, came out with a statement that China must respect the arbitral ruling. The arbitral ruling is binding on the Philippines and China, and that is important for the rule of law. So that was a very strong statement, and we did not even ask the UK, France, and Germany to say that. But had we uh, asked them before, right after the ruling came out, they would have done that. They were just waiting for us to request for them because they were saying, how can we uh, uh, strongly come out in favor of the ruling when you yourself you are silent about it? So
So,
that is why I was very surprised, very happy to hear Germany, UK, and France come out in one note verbal. That's very
yes.
unique.
Mm.
They came out strongly that China must comply with the arbitral ruling, even if we did not ask for it. And the US also came out before that, a few weeks before that. Australia also came out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they are really just waiting for us to make our move. But they cannot be more popish than the Pope. I mean,
Yes,
uh,
right.
they cannot go out and say, we are doing this for the Philippines because we are a sovereign state. We should know what to do for our own
Yes.
good.
Okay,
But
I know
Justice,
that this might be last na lang water under the bridge, no? But if the president had done that earlier, and if we had gained international support much earlier, do you think that it would have prevented, these forays of China into our territories?
Well, when the ruling came out, China was already there in those seven geologic features. They had already uh, uh, started or about to finish their artificial islands. Uh, that would have continued, but at least it would have sent a very strong message to China to back off or not to prevent us from, like right now, every time we send a ship to read bank, to survey, read bank, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel would drive away our survey ship. We cannot even conduct a survey in our own exclusive economic zone. But had we had if we came out early with the support of the U.S., Australia, UK, France, Germany, Japan, I think we would have been able to send a survey ship there without the Chinese blocking it. Right now, we cannot send a survey ship.
but Justice, what can the international community really do? I mean, we cannot. Malacanang has already said we're not asking for a UN vote on the issue. What kind? You were talking about convincing other countries. What form will this take? And then, if we can convince enough countries, what can the international community do?
Well, this is the original plan, no? Where after we planned that when the ruling uh, would come out, we would campaign among the countries. We would go to Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, because they are in the same boat. They're prejudiced by the Nine Dash Line. And we would tell them that we would bring this to the United Nations General Assembly. And we would ask our ally, the US, and all our friends, UK, France, Germany, Australia, Japan, to support us. If you put together the economic aid of the US, UK, France, Germany, Australia, you put them together, they would be far more than the economic aid that China gives to other countries. So this is a huge support. These countries have a huge influence over developing countries. They could convince these developing countries to vote for us. And these developing countries have their own coastline. And they're also afraid that their bigger neighbors might seize their exclusive economic zone. Their only protection is UNCLOS. Without UNCLOS, they would be at the mercy of their bigger neighbors. So they have a self-interest also to see to it that UNCLOS is preserved, that China respects the decision, because if China does not respect the decision, UNCLOS will collapse. And if UNCLOS collapses, there's nothing that will protect their exclusive economic zone. To protect their exclusive economic zone, they have to buy warships, warbases, missiles. It's very expensive. They will divert funds that's supposed to go to education, social services. They'll have to use that to buy arms. Everybody will be the loser. So every state really has an interest in preserving UNCLOS.
Okay.
So
I
we
mean,
expect
Justice,
really an overwhelming majority to support us.
Justice Carpio, only because you mentioned Malaysia and Vietnam, maybe I'll shift topic a little bit here, but it's still related. Um, uh, because of Malaysia and care of our Foreign Affairs Secretary, the issue of Sabah has come up again. And question to you, sir, how should we be handling the question of Sabah now? And what implication might our position on that have in wanting to have this united front in the South China Sea?
I have already explained publicly that the territory of the Sultan of Sulu never faced the South China Sea. So the territory of the Sultan of Sulu has no territorial sea, no exclusive economic zone facing the South China Sea, facing the West Philippine Sea. The territory of the Sultan of Sulu faced the Sulu Sea and the Celebes Sea. So there is no overlap. We are not waiving anything if we enter into a, let's say, sea boundary agreement with Malaysia facing the South China Sea, because the territory of the Sultan of Sulu never faced the South China Sea. And
No, but
that has been studied already.
I
There
ask
is
in the context. We asked her in the context of our relationship with Malaysia, and as you said, us wanting to have a united front, certainly among the ASEAN claimants in territories that are in the South China Sea. I ask in the context of that. I mean, on the one hand, we keep bringing up this reopening this sensitive topic on Sabah. On the other hand, we want Malaysia on our side when we bring up everything that we want to bring up against China.
Yeah, that's precisely my point. There is no overlap. There's no inconsistency, because the territory of the Sultan of Sulu, which we are claiming, has no coastline facing the South China Sea. So we can separate the issues. These are
Okay.
two separate issues. They do not overlap. And let us not combine them, because if we combine them, then we cannot form a common front. Let us separate them. And with that, we can enter into a common front with Vietnam and Malaysia, because these are the three countries that are facing the spread list.
I see.
So we can do that. There was a note verbal that we sent in protest to the extended continental shelf claim of Malaysia, but I think we made an error there, because we said that the territory of the Sultan of Sulu has an exclusive as maritime zones facing the West Philippine Sea. And the Malaysian note verbal was also wrong in saying that we are claiming maritime zones beyond territorial sea in the spread list. No, we're not. And we have amended our baselines law to comply strictly with UNCLOS, and that has been settled in the arbitration. So I think both sides now realize that there's really no overlap. We can separate both disputes so that we can face China with a common front.
Assuming, sir, that we are able to solicit the support of Malaysia and Vietnam and Taiwan and Indonesia, what what kind of modus vivendi can we realistically expect in the West Philippine Sea at this point? Will it be just status quo and no more further build up of installations or in any of the territories, or can we ever get it back to what it was before the 2012 Panatag Duha?
Well, what we can do is we can enter into a convention or a treaty with Malaysia and Vietnam that none of the geologic features in the Spratlys generate an EEZ, only territorial sea. That is the ruling of the arbitral tribunal, and they both agree, Vietnam and Malaysia. So we can sign a convention that none of those geologic features have EEZ, and therefore there are only territorial seas. Beyond the territorial seas are is the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, and they agree. Do not claim our exclusive economic zone. There's only one country that's claiming our exclusive economic zone, China. So we can have that convention that beyond the territorial sea of all these geologic features,
Nag-lock.
Mm.
Nawala siya.
Tignan.
Nawala
Pero
siya.
parang kuminsan, pag iniisip mo, when you analyze the West Philippine Sea and the disputes around it, no, parang napapaisip ka, how can we bring it back to what it was? It seems impossible. And
Mm.
yeah, no, and how do you yeah, Justice Carpio, sorry about that.
Justice.
Yes, you were talking about a convention that we could probably organize to settle what exactly?
again,
Yeah, Justice Carpio, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Justice?
yeah,
Justice.
Yeah. You
No,
were
well,
talking about a convention with
yeah.
Malaysia and Indonesia.
That convention will act ruling by state practice. That is an application of the ruling, an enforcement of the ruling, arbitral ruling by state practice. Because the ruling says there are no exclusive economic zones from those islands in the spread list. And when Vietnam, Malaysia agree to sign that, then they adopt the ruling. That enforces the ruling. Because technically the ruling binds only the Philippines and China. They are the only parties to that. Under international law,
Yes.
the ruling applies only. So by asking Vietnam and Malaysia, since they agree with the ruling, to officially adopt it, you are applying the ruling, enforcing the ruling by state practice. And we will ask also the US to join us in the convention, UK, France, Japan, and Australia, because we will say that in that convention, beyond the territorial sea of the islands in the spread list, will be the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines where they can conduct freedom of navigation on our flight. And they like that. They will sign. So when they sign that, they are recognizing that we have an exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea beyond the territorial sea of those geologic features in the spread list. And that will directly rebut the Chinese claim that we don't have an EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. The naval powers now officially sign a document rebutting China's claim that we don't have an EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. That is how you fortify the ruling by state practice. And they will surely agree because that's what they've been saying. It's a matter of putting it in writing formally. Vietnam agrees to that. Malaysia agrees to that. The US. So let us just formalize it, and that will strengthen the ruling.
But
It becomes
Justice,
now
there are
a
overlapping
convention, a legal document,
Yes.
part of international law.
Yes.
Justice.
There are overlapping claims. For example,
Well, there are two disputes. There are
Yes.
two disputes in the West Philippine, in the South China Sea: the territorial dispute and the maritime dispute. The maritime dispute has been settled by the arbitral ruling. Vietnam agrees with that. Malaysia, Indonesia agrees with that. But the territorial dispute was not part of the arbitral ruling. The territorial dispute uh, refers to the question as who owns those geologic features.
Oh, I see.
That remains because there's no tribunal that can rule on that. We are saying that can continue, but that is less than 3% of the total area.
I
It's
see.
just a small area. We're trying to reduce the area of the dispute so that we can manage the dispute.
I see.
So
I see.
everybody agrees that the only dispute really among Vietnam, Asia, the Philippines, Brunei, and Indonesia are those territories, very small. But on the water, yeah, we agree. So let's formalize that. And China is the only country now questioning our ownership, our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. Let's
Yes.
bring in the US to sign in, and they will.
Justice,
Nawawala.
So
nawawala.
that's how we fortify the ruling. We have to use diplomacy here.
But justice,
Yeah.
justice, it will not stop China from doing what it's been doing in the South China Sea. And for that, I think they will support. Justice, can you hear us? Justice, can you
Yes, I
hear
can
us?
hear you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
what
can.
China is supporting is the code of conduct. And I remember you warned that in negotiating the code of conduct, we must avoid reinforcing the status quo over which they will exercise ownership of their artificial islands. So how are we going to go about forging this code of conduct? Because it looks like even our government is preferring this route to settle this dispute.
Well, I'm happy that Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin has said that he will insist to include the arbitral ruling in the code of conduct. Second, he will insist that other foreign naval powers can conduct freedom of navigation exercises in the South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea. So, if the arbitral ruling is included, then we don't have a problem because then China will be forced to accept that we have sovereign rights. So the position of the DFA is correct. We should insist that the arbitral ruling is included because if the arbitral ruling is not included and the code of conduct is signed, China will say the code of conduct has superseded the arbitral ruling because that was not included. They will take that position.
So under the code of
I just
under the code of conduct, what happens to the artificial islands? What will be their status? Because they're not
The code
recognized
of
under.
conduct, yes, the code of conduct is intended to manage the disputes so that there will be no tension, there will be no skirmishes, there will be no firing, but it is not intended to settle who owns those
Yeah.
islands. It does not settle the substantive issues. The substantive issues on maritime matters will be settled under UNCLOS, and that has been settled already between China and the Philippines. But as to the substantive issue on who owns those islands, that's not the intention. That will not be addressed in the Code of Conduct because the Code of Conduct is merely to manage the dispute so there will be no shooting. As, while the substantive issues will be addressed in some other way. So that is the Code of Conduct so that the states will just behave pending resolution of the substantive issues.
Justice Carpio, this question, I imagine if I ask this question of anybody else, I'm just asking them to speculate. But you are one of the real scholars. You're an avid watcher of this development. You've been advocating for this for years. So here's the question that we're hoping you could take this beyond the realm of speculation. Why now? You've been wanting this government to take a stronger position. You've been wanting President Duterte to say what he said at the UN General Assembly. Why now, 4 years later? What happened in the international arena? Were there any developments in any of the things that we've been talking about in UNCLOS, in Asia, that you think might have triggered this development?
Well, I can only speculate. I have not mentioned this, but let me mention it here now. It's just speculation, by the way. Uh, you see, the president said, I am setting aside the arbitral ruling so we can get loans, investments, tourists, pogos from China. In other words, let's set aside the dispute and just pay and get investments from China. So what has happened now? $24 billion have been promised by China. Less than 5% has materialized, and we have less than 2 years to go. China has also an economic problem because of the pandemic, and I do not think nobody believes that the 24 billion will materialize those loans and investments. So that's gone already. The tourists are not coming because of the pandemic. They will not come in the next more than 12 months. The pogos are closing down. The Chinese government is canceling the passports of pogo workers in the Philippines, so they cannot come back here anymore. So what else? So I think the president, this is just speculation, by the way, probably sent a message to China. You have not delivered.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. But it's a happy development as far as I'm concerned. Because frankly, as I said, the president was taken for a ride. He froze the arbitral ruling, but he got nothing, absolutely nothing. So probably he's starting to recover. He by maybe it's time to assert the ruling now because he hasn't received anything substantial from China. That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Right.
What about what about implications on exploration rights? I mean, does this impact our right to explore, which is what we also want to do? And in fact, I understand that several companies have already begun planning exploration rights in the West Philippine Sea.
Yes, we have actually signed a memorandum of understanding with China. And to implement that, we signed the terms of reference. The MOU basically says that the Philippines will accept China National Offshore Company as a service contractor to extract the gas in Reed Bank. That's the bottom line. I'm supporting this because it's not joint development. We are not sharing our sovereign rights with China. Under the service contract, the first whereas clause of the service contract says the sovereign rights belong to the Philippines. The service contractor will extract the gas and will be paid for his services in cash or in kind. That's basically the service contract. The service contractor in Reed Bank is, of course, Forum Energy. And it is up to Forum Energy to enter into a contract with China National Offshore Company, the state-owned company of China that does commercial exploitation of gas. They can enter into a contract between themselves, but Sinop will have to be bound by the service contract. And in that service contract, there's a recognition that we have the sovereign rights. So for me, that's okay. And this is the light at the end of the tunnel. When the Vietnamese and the Chinese had a tense standoff in Vanguard Bank, the Chinese told the Vietnamese, wait for the MOU and the terms of reference and the next agreement to be signed by China and the Philippines because you can have the same arrangement. In other words, China is looking at the MOU as the South China Sea-wide solution to the South China Sea dispute.
Yeah.
It will apply to Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. And the Vietnamese tell me, well, if the Chinese recognize our sovereign rights, that's okay. We can make them the service contractor. As far as I'm concerned, we are paying Shell to get the gas in Malampaya 40% of the net proceeds. Sinop will get the same amount, Sinop and its partners. So we are not giving up anything, but we are getting China to recognize our sovereign rights. So this is really the light at the end of the tunnel. That's why I support the third administration. Let's go into this MOU. let's sign the terms of reference. And the next step was supposed to be the bilateral agreement between Sinuk and Forum Energy. But COVID intervened and the meeting was not held. So it's in limbo right now. And I don't know if China is still willing to proceed because the pandemic
They
has
have
been
changed their position.
has been solved by China. We are still suffering from the pandemic. China might think that they have the upper hand. I really do not know. But hopefully it will resume. We will sign that agreement and we would have found a formula to settle the dispute in the South China Sea. In other words, China will agree we have the sovereign rights, but it gets 40%. They have to work for it. They have to do services.
Wala.
Wala.
Okay. Justice, well, I guess that's it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We'd like to thank Justice Antonio Carpio, always enlightening to everyone on the show. Okay, he's coming back. Hindi na. Okay.
And
Sorry about that.
will get credit for this if
Yes.
it pushes through.
Okay.
Okay. Justice,
Salamat.
sorry.
Salamat.
We've run out of time. Justice Antonio Carpio. Always good to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Maraming salamat po.
Okay, and that will be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. But we hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News.